In today's video, I'm going to delve deep into the career of one of British boxing's most polarising figures, a man who just wanted to get home to his wife and kids. Tony the Bomber Bellew. The mad scouser had a fiery passion and wore his heart on his sleeve, but how good was he as a fighter? Well, let's find out, and answer the ultimate question. How good was Tony the Bomber Bellew actually? Growing up in a rough neighbourhood in Liverpool, a young Tony Bellew was always getting into trouble, and like most kids in the area, just needed direction and discipline in his life. He found kickboxing at an early age, and was taught by his dad's friend, who just happened to be a British and world champion. Bellew showed lots of promise in his newfound sport, and quickly rose through the ranks, earning himself a brown belt, which was just one away from black belt. Bellew was told it would take him an entire year before he was able to compete for his black belt, which annoyed him, and he decided to leave kickboxing altogether. After knocking out his last few opponents with punches to the head, for which Bellew was disqualified, he would switch sports and move into boxing. The transition was very successful, and Bellew would go on to win 3 consecutive ABA heavyweight titles. Yeah, I should point out that Bellew fought at heavyweight in the amateurs, which is just crazy to think about when you consider that Bellew campaigned initially at light heavyweight in his pro career. The well-known aggressive power of Bellew was on full display in the amateurs, and he'd soon earn the nickname Bomber for his ability to end fights. He would knock his opponents out cold. He would retire from the amateur game with a final record of 40 wins, with 32 of those wins coming by knockout, and suffering 7 defeats. Bellew would turn professional with Frank Warren and would make his debut on the 6th of October 2007, winning by second round TKO against journeyman Jamie Ambler. Bellew's first crisis moment of his career came in his 7th fight against Latvian Jevgenijs Angevies. I definitely pronounced that correctly. As for the fight itself, I couldn't actually find any footage of it, but on BoxRec it does say that Bellew was dropped in round 4, but would win on points over 4 rounds. After picking up 12 mostly one-sided wins on the domestic scene, Bellew would then challenge for the vacant Commonwealth title against Ghanaian fighter Atoli Moore. In the Echo Arena in Liverpool, Bellew would make light work of Atoli and finish him in just 1 round following a barrage of heavy punches. In his first defence of his Commonwealth title, Bellew would suffer a scare when he had to recover from a flash knockdown against 8-1 Bob Adjasaf. Bellew looked dominant in the first few rounds and seemed to be on the verge of taking Adjasaf out. However, in the 4th round, Bellew was dropped by a left hand. He managed to get back up and went straight on the front foot and even wobbled Adjasaf with a right hand. In round 8, Bellew was close to dropping the challenger once again, but the knockout wasn't meant to be, and Bellew would box to a unanimous decision. Overall, it was a frustrating performance for Bellew. In Bellew's second defence of his Commonwealth title, he had to survive a huge gut check against former Commonwealth champion Oville Mackenzie. In the first round, Bellew was dropped by a right hand to the top of the head, but Bellew recovered well and survived the round. However, he would soon be dropped again in round 2 with a straight right, which was a much harder knockdown than the first. Bellew got back up and got straight back into the fight, showing a lot of heart and great recovery skills. Even though Bellew was the one who was dropped, he was the one on the front foot looking to initiate the action. The fight remained back and forth until the 8th round, where Bellew landed a textbook left hook to drop Mackenzie. The challenger got back to his feet, but Bellew would rush straight towards him, landing a right hand, which was enough for the referee to stop the fight. Bellew would get his first world title shot on the 18th of May 2011 against WBO world champion Nathan Cleverly. However, the fight wouldn't happen due to Bellew failing to make weight, and instead he'd make a 3rd successful defence of his Commonwealth title in a rematch against Oville Mackenzie. The fight was much more tame compared to their first meeting, and fought at a much slower pace. Bellew was more defensively minded, which makes sense considering how open he was in their first encounter. Bellew played it safe and did what he needed to do to win, and after 12 rounds he'd win by unanimous decision, and had also captured the vacant British light heavyweight title. In his next fight, Bellew would finally compete for his first world title against Nathan Cleverly. Bellew started the fight fast, he landed a hard right in round 2, but the champion would begin to take over the fight in the middle rounds, finding his rhythm and getting success with left hooks and uppercuts. Bellew made the fight competitive and he put on a brave effort, but ultimately I felt the Welsh champion outworked Bellew and landed the cleaner shots on the night. Despite giving Cleverly the hardest fight of his career, it wasn't enough to become world champion, and the Welshman would retain his undefeated record and his WBO belt.
It's there's no consolation, but what a fight, Tony. You had to come out on the losing side, I guess, in the end, but how do you think it went personally?
I'm just devastated, I've got me 2 kids, and I can only apologise to my kids, it's just, he was good on the night, he threw a lot of punches, and I'm just gutted.
After the Cleverly fight, Bellew's promotional contract with Frank Warren would come to an end, and he would sign with Frank's rival, Eddie Hearn, who was currently building out his stable, signing the likes of Darren Barker and Kell Brook in recent years. The transition to Matchroom wasn't the smoothest to say the least, and involved a court battle with Warren that Bellew would eventually win. In his comeback fight, Bellew would take on former European champion Danny McIntosh. Bellew would make light work of McIntosh and knock him out in the 5th round. Following this win, Bellew would stop former world title challenger Edison Miranda in the 9th round. Doing so, he captured the WBC international title and was one step closer to getting a 2nd world title shot. Bellew's next fight against Argentinian Roberto Bellonti saw him have to battle with a bad cut from the 1st round to win on points. In doing so, he captured the WBC silver title. With these ranking belts, Bellew was knocking on the door for another opportunity to fight for a world title, but first he would have to win a WBC world title eliminator against Usyk Chilemba. Bellew put on a very laboured performance in front of his home crowd. Neither fighter really landed anything significant for the majority of the fight, and Bellew just looked flat on the night. He struggled to pin Chilemba down, and the African fighter put on a solid display, showing good combination punching and picking his shots well in certain rounds. After 12 rounds, the judges deemed the fight a draw, so a rematch was inevitable. The two would meet again just a couple months later. In a must-win fight for Bellew, he would have to endure another hard-fought fight to win by unanimous decision. Bellew took the first few rounds using his jab effectively, and this strong start really won him the fight. Chilemba came on strong in the later rounds, but it wasn't enough to turn the tide of the fight. After another 12 rounds, this time Bellew would get the W and set himself up for a 2nd world title shot. In Bellew's 2nd world title attempt, he would travel to Canada to take on Superman Adonis Stevenson. Bellew gave the champion some problems early with his movement and kept the champion at a distance. Bellew's strategy was to counterpunch, and he did counter Stevenson well at times. In round 4, Bellew caught Stevenson with a right hand and had him backing up, and he followed up with a left hand that dropped Stevenson, but it turned out to be a slip. Despite a decent start for Bellew, Stevenson was taking over the fight and overwhelming him with his fast hands. And in round 6, Stevenson cracked Bellew with a left hand, which dropped him. Bellew got back up but was still hurt, and with plenty of time left in the round, it was only a matter of time until Stevenson found his range again. The Canadian champion would land a short left, which had Bellew rocked, and he would follow up with another short left, which forced the referee to stop the fight and prevent Bellew from being knocked out cold. After 2 failed world title attempts at light heavyweight, Bellew stepped up to cruiserweight and joined forces with British trainer Dave Caldwell. I honestly feel in hindsight that Bellew should have started his career at cruiserweight, as he looked drained at light heavyweight. It's almost hard to imagine how he ever made that weight class in the first place. He was a gigantic light heavyweight. Bellew would make his debut in his new division, taking on experienced Russian Valery Brudov for the vacant WBO international title. You could see how much the extra £25 had benefited Bellew, as he looked much more powerful in this fight. He would drop the Russian 3 times in the fight, the first one coming late into round 2, where Bellew landed a perfect 1-2 combination to floor Brudov. In round 6, Bellew would find his range for his right hand once again, and dropped Brudov heavily, but luckily for the Russian, the round was over. It wasn't all one-way traffic, however, as in round 7, Brudov rocked Bellew with a well-timed right hand. Bellew was in massive trouble, but luckily for him, Brudov made a massive mistake, landing a low blow which gave Bellew some breathing room. Once the action resumed, Brudov almost immediately landed another right hand, and Bellew was in a real crisis moment. Bellew, however, managed to tough it out and survive the onslaught from the Russian. In the 12th round, Brudov attempted a left hand, but was countered by a fantastically well-timed left hook from Bellew that ended the fight for good. Brudov put on a very spirited performance. He certainly didn't lack ambition, and he made Bellew dig deep in the fight. Bellew would deliver another great knockout in his next fight against Brazilian Julio Cesar dos Santos. In the 5th round, the two were exchanging hooks, but Bellew got his left hand off first and dropped the Brazilian. Dos Santos got back up, but his legs were all over the place and the referee stopped the fight. It was one of the best performances I've seen from Bellew up until this point. Immediately after the fight, Bellew started engaging in a war of words with his old foe, Nathan Cleverly, who was at ringside during the fight. Bellew made it very clear that he wanted to run that one back, and the rematch was made for November of 2014. In what was famously one of the worst pay-per-views that Eddie Hearn has ever put on, the rematch was a scrappy and cautious affair, with both men not looking to overly commit. Bellew did a lot of his best work in the fight in the later rounds, such as in round 9, where Bellew landed a big hook followed by a barrage of punches, which had Cleverly hurt. Bellew continued to find success in round 10, putting the Welshman onto the ropes and landing more right hands. Cleverly was in full defensive mode as the Liverpudlian was desperate to get the finish. Bellew made sure to give Cleverly very little time to breathe right up until the end of the fight, and after 12 rounds, Bellew would win by split decision. It was a very forgettable fight and not the best performance from either man, but Bellew did enough to win, I thought. Following a couple more wins in his new division, Bellew would then fight highly ranked contender and former world title challenger Mateusz Masternak for the vacant European cruiserweight title. Bellew was pressuring Masternak and using solid combination punching to assert himself early on in the fight. Masternak took advantage of the aggression from Bellew and was making Bellew pay for his lack of defense, landing some stiff jabs. The fight was close throughout, and it was really the last few rounds that decided it. Bellew outworked the pole and would win by unanimous decision. It was a brutal and entertaining fight, and a decent performance from Bellew, who was now an established top contender in the cruiserweight division. On the 29th of May 2016, Tony Bellew would challenge Ilunga Makabu for the vacant WBC Cruiserweight World title. In the first round, Bellew used his height and reach advantage well. As the round was coming to a close, Bellew managed to get Makabu onto the ropes and started to unload shots. However, he made the mistake of not respecting what was coming back at him, and he would be dropped by a left hand from Makabu. Bellew wasn't overly hurt from the knockdown, his legs were fine and he was able to quickly recover. Luckily for Bellew, the knockdown came at the end of the round. In the second round, Bellew went for a more measured approach and reverted back to his boxing. In the third round, Bellew was starting to get into a rhythm. He was picking his shots well and once again got Makabu onto the ropes. However, this time he was more careful. Bellew unloaded a series of hard punches, with the left hook being the final blow, which knocked Makabu's spark out. In his beloved Goodison Park, Bellew was now the new WBC Cruiserweight Champion of the world.
Listen to that. Have you ever seen anything like that? And do you know the last time I seen that? I was in a Hollywood movie. I've lived the dream tonight. Nothing was going to stop me, and I am the best cruiserweight in the world. I have proven it tonight.
Bellew would make a successful first defense of his WBC title against 37-year-old BJ Flores. Flores started the fight well and showed solid technical skills. In the second round, Bellew landed a low blow on Flores, which Flores tried to signal to the referee, but the fight continued, and Bellew took full advantage by dropping the American with a left hook. Bellew would get 2 more knockdowns and score a 10-6 round. In the third and final round of the fight, Bellew would close the show with his signature left hook, which dropped Flores for the 4th time, and the fight was over. Immediately after the fight was finished, Bellew started a verbal assault on the former cruiserweight and heavyweight champion David Haye, who was at ringside at the fight. On the 25th of November 2016, Eddie Hearn announced that Bellew vs Haye was on, and Bellew would be moving up to heavyweight. Haye made it very clear in the build-up that he was overlooking Bellew and his skill set. And to be honest, I, like many prior to this fight, thought that Haye would beat Bellew fairly comfortably. But what transpired in the O2 Arena on the 4th of March 2017 was anything but comfortable for David Haye. On the night, it turned out that David Haye was shot to pieces. From the opening round, Haye was showing all the signs of a washed-up fighter. His speed was nowhere near what it used to be, his punches were wild and almost amateurish at times, and his timing was non-existent. Haye thought he could just steamroll Bellew in a couple rounds, but the fight would turn out to be a nightmare for the former world champion. Round 6 was where everything fell apart for Haye, and I mean literally. Haye's Achilles snapped, and what occurred next was easily the best round of the entire fight for me. Both men took to the centre of the ring and started unloading bombs. Haye managed to survive up to round 11 with just heart and determination, but would be finally stopped after being knocked out of the ring, and then his corner team would throw in the towel. The two would meet again in a rematch, but Bellew would win even more decisively this time around. I thought Hay looked decent in the first round or two, and that was because he was going back to his boxing. However, Hay showed really poor fight IQ, and instead of sticking to his boxing, he was desperately trying to get the knockout. And Bellew would catch him with a superb left hook and a right hand, which floored him, and a second knockdown would soon follow. Bellew landed a pinpoint left hand that put Hay down in the 5th. Hay bravely got back up, but would soon be finished for good as Bellew launched another assault, which forced the referee Howard Foster to stop the fight. Following back-to-back wins against David Haye, Tony Bellew was at an all-time high in confidence, and he was at the peak of his powers. So naturally, he wanted to test himself and see how good he truly was. There was no better test for him than to go up against arguably the greatest cruiserweight to ever live, Alexander Usyk. In the early rounds of the fight, Bellew looked sharp, he showed a lot of technical skill, and he managed to keep Usyk at bay. In round 4, Usyk landed the biggest shot so far in the fight when he landed a huge counter left that momentarily stunned Bellew. As good as Bellew looked in these early rounds, Usyk was patiently waiting for the openings. The brilliance of Usyk is, in my opinion, his ability to pace himself in a fight, and he did that tremendously well here. In these early rounds, he was in first gear, but as the fight headed into round 6, you could see Usyk moving up the gears, while Bellew was starting to lower his output. Usyk started to outclass Bellew, and he comfortably won round 7. In round 8, Usyk continued to dominate with his jab, and you could see Bellew was looking battered and bruised at this point. The Ukrainian would eventually end the fight, landing a big left which hurt Bellew, and he followed up with another left hand which sent Bellew crashing to the canvas, and the fight was waved off.
And I lost to one of the pound for pound best that's ever done. He's fantastic, he beat me fair and square.
Is that the end for you?
Oh, it's definitely the end. Come here. You are a great champion.
After daring to be great against one of the finest boxers to ever live, Bellew would announce his retirement from the sport at 35 years old, retiring with a final record of 31 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw, capturing the British and Commonwealth light heavyweight titles, winning the European Cruiserweight title, and of course becoming the WBC Cruiserweight Champion of the world. So with all that said, how good was Tony Bellew actually? I consider Bellew one of those fighters who maximised his potential. He was never going to be an all-time great, but what he did have was some solid attributes, such as good power, especially with his world-class left hook, and good fight IQ. But above all that, his best attribute was his heart. As for his resume, well, it lacks substance, with his legacy-defining wins being 2 back-to-back wins against a diminished David Haye, and winning the world title against Makabu. Overall, I'd say that Tony is an overachiever. But for what he managed to achieve with, in my opinion, a limited skill set, is very impressive. He gave it his all and was involved in plenty of entertaining fights. So there we go, that's Tony Bellew's boxing career. Unfortunately, once he retired, we never saw him again, as he just wanted to be left alone with his wife and kids. Let me know what your thoughts are on Tony Bellew in the comments below. Do you think I was being too harsh on him, or like me, do you think he overachieved? As always, thanks very much for watching.